Hey everybody, how you all doing? Welcome to it. Another amazing episode, The Occult History of the Knights of Malta. We've never done a show on this. I'm so excited. Author Tony McMahon will be joining us alongside Miss Jessie Czebotar. Going to be a great show. Fasten your seatbelts, get ready. It's coming up next. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to it. What an amazing show we got for you. We thank you for joining us, and fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be great. Before we get into it, let's do a little bit of spring cleaning, as we should say, starting off the show. What a great month it's been, guys. We'd had Evil Curses with Jessie at the beginning of the month. We had Possession last week with Adam Bly. This guy was phenomenal, an incredible demonologist. He's a layman. He works for the clergy. He's actually not a priest, but he works with them quite closely. Very well-spoken, knowledgeable. I highly recommend you guys check out the show. Tonight, we get into the Knights of Malta with Tony McMahon. And next week, Occult Urban Legends with Jessie Czebotar. And what are we going to talk about? What are these occult urban legends? Well, the one that we will share with you, we're going to talk about ley lines, stargates, certain locations around the earth where they claim that witches and warlocks, they go to these locations because they feel the energy is strong there during certain high moons and the time of the year, and they do rituals. So we're going to get into that. That's all coming up. What a great show. And guys, by the way, no longer on PayPal, only on Venmo. So here you go. Now on Venmo, use account name George Iceman. We love all the support to stay here on YouTube. We do an after show. Coming up next, Q&A. On Patreon, but here on YouTube. If you want to support, keep the show here, and you like the information, knowledge, and research we do, guys, show a little love. Anything and everything goes a very long way to keep the show going. Again, now on Venmo, account name George Iceman. We thank you so much and appreciate all the love and support. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. First, let's bring my co-host and author, Miss Jessie Czebotar. Jessie, how you doing today? Oh, she's having a little bit of issues with the weather where she's from, so the internet isn't the very best, so she might be in or out. We'll try it again. Not there. So while we wait for her to maybe try to come back and reboot, let's get our guest of honor tonight. He's been on a few times. We've touched on several different topics. I love having him as a regular, very well read, very well knowledgeable of a lot of things. And this guy, in the past few months specifically, has been traveling, doing conferences, speaking engagements, great books. Highly, highly recommend you go out and buy his book. At the end of the show, he'll tell you how you can get it. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Tony McMahon. Tony, welcome back to the show.
Hi, hello. Well, I'm in London today. London, UK, not London, Ontario.
Now, what time is it there in London right now?
It is 7:10 in the evening.
Wow. Okay. I know you got things to do. You have a lot of meetings. You're traveling. There's a lot going on. So let's get into it. The fans are excited. They want to know what is happening. We're going to talk about the Knights of Malta. I'll begin with a video that I shared with you specifically. I sent it to you. I go, why don't we do a show on this? And you said, great idea. So I'll play the video first, and then we'll your comments, and we'll get into it. So turn up your volumes. Here it is, folks.
The Knights of Malta is an order who takes an oath of complete obedience to work towards a new world order for the Pope, as stated by William Cooper in Behold a Pale Horse. The Pope, of course, is really just a figurehead for the Black Pope, who is one and the same as the superior general of the Jesuits. The Knights of Malta, originally the Hospitallers, were modeled after the Knights Templar, and in 1099, Godefroy de Bouillon provided them with their first endowment in the newly formed feudal state of Jerusalem, sparking a trend among kings and nobles that quickly made the order immensely wealthy and powerful. The Hospitallers played a central role during the 1307 suppression of the Knights Templar. In 1312, Pope Clement V's bull Ad Providem legally granted the rights of seized Templar properties to the Knights of St. John. Fleeing Templar adepts sought refuge with the Hospitallers, smuggling vast French assets into Switzerland, out of the reach of the French king and the Pope. The Hospitallers had already established a strong Swiss presence after Kuno von Boetzsee donated assets to the Bern-Mittelland region in 1180. By 1192, Bubicon had become their chief commandery, effectively creating a haven for the suppressed Templars and their wealth. Together, these anonymous mercenary knights of St. John and Templars became the hidden founders of the highly secure Swiss banking system, which is the center of global banking today. The order adopted a white cross to represent, quote, peace on a blood-red field of war during the conflicts against Saladin, contrasting the Templars' red cross. The white cross emblem was subsequently adopted as the national flag of Switzerland.
There, Tony. And we'll break it down anytime you're ready. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, you know, I was in. Hello again, Jesse. The thunder. You've not been struck by thunder. That's very reassuring.
Yes.
I mean, I think the first thing to say about just to break it down a bit, because he covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah.
The Knights, I mean, I say Hospitaller, but he says Hospitaller, but I'll say Hospitaller if you bear with that. But the Knights, everybody's heard of the Knights Templar, but not everybody's heard of the Knights Hospitaller. And what you have to know is these two sacred orders of holy warriors, they existed at the same time during the Crusades, but the Knights Hospitaller are actually a bit older than the Templars, and they're called the Knights Hospitaller because originally they were like a kind of medical corps out in the Holy Land, providing medical assistance for both soldiers and pilgrims. But they became much more than that. And actually, it's interesting. He talks about the relationship with the Templars because actually, a lot of the time, they hated each other, and they really hated each other. The Pope even tried to get them to merge at one point. They said, we are never going to merge. So these were kind of two distinct orders. And the Hospitallers were kind of founded, as I say, in the 1000s, whereas the Templars are founded in the 1100s, and originally by Italian merchants. And they kind of grew really in power and prestige at the same time as the Templars. And at the heart was a kind of a group of soldiers that were called the professed. And the professed were the ones who took, the vows of poverty, chastity, obedience. They had the same kind of structure as the Templars, a Grand Commander and all those kind of ranks. They had the same kind of secrecy. But the difference is that while the Templars were crushed in the year 1307, Friday the 13th, as we know, the Hospitallers somehow managed to carry on, and not just carry on, but a lot of the Templar assets were handed over to the Hospitallers. And, a lot of Templars ended up going into the kind of hiding out within the Hospitallers. Now, some people think that wasn't a happy relationship, and actually those Templars, hated their new home. Some people think that they came to some kind of accommodation together. But I think it must have been a difficult time for the Templars. But the Hospitallers, they carry on, but they are both the Templars and Hospitallers are pushed out of the Middle East because they lose the Crusades. But whereas the Templars are crushed at that time when the Crusades are going wrong, the Hospitallers, they kind of set up a new home in Rhodes, on the island of Rhodes in the Mediterranean, and they kind of actually become kind of pirates in the Mediterranean. They kind of carry on fighting the Muslims in the east, but eventually they're pushed by the Muslims into Malta. And if you ever go to Malta, it's an amazing place, beautiful fortresses, but they basically are based in Malta, and very famously, in 1565, the Ottoman Turks, the biggest Muslim empire in the East, tried to take Malta. And if Malta fell, then Europe was going to go Muslim, basically. You were going to have a totally different history of the world. And the Knights of Malta, as they then were, somehow managed to defeat this huge Turkish army, but massive bloodshed. I mean, they lost a lot of people, but they held Malta, the Siege of Malta it's called, and changed history. And they carried on, as the rulers of Malta until Napoleon Bonaparte turned up basically in 1799 and said, it's all over, guys. But they still exist today. And as that guy was saying, they have a strange relationship with the Vatican, which I can talk about.
Yes.
They also have a strange relationship with the occult.
Yes.
Freemasonry. Freemasonry actually a very odd relationship there. And, and a lot of people, do raise questions about their secrecy. I no doubt you're familiar as well with the theory that they have even infiltrated the US military.
Yes.
Which journalist Seymour Hersh said this back in 2011. So I'll shut up and give it back to you guys.
Well, Jess, I know if you got to see that clip of that video and what we were talking about, he definitely he touched on so much of its history and so forth. But one thing it said specifically, if maybe you could touch on, is they're now like the banking system, and the main places in Switzerland, they adopted the Maltese cross there, and maybe you could touch on that and what you know about in regards to the banking system there.
Well, it gets a little interesting because it's much more than just what we would call our regular financial institutions. And this connects back to their flags, their symbols, their crosses that they use. Within these occult groups and secret societies in your Knights of Malta, you get different layers. Their symbols actually tell you who they are, where they can operate, and what they're doing. So part of their secret studies gets into the Kabbalahism. When you look at their crosses, like we see, like with Switzerland, with you get your base Knight of Malta cross, which is just completely square. Or like I call it squared. It's like even vertical, even horizontal. But then we notice, like with your other groups, that they begin to get triangles within that same kind of image. All of that means something. So, the base one that's used for Switzerland and the Red Cross and your base groups is kind of their recruiting. It also connects to their light side, or what they're going to call their Kabbalah magic. But the upper part, this would be the Kabbalah tree that many of us see and know. That Kabbalah tree actually has two parts. So there's a whole dark side, which gets into their unholy contracts. So when we see, the dipped in sides in the cross, we see it looks like an upside down triangle, 4 upside down triangles kind of coming together at a point. That means that they're operating under the dark side of their Kabbalah magic. So it gets kind of interesting when you look at that. How does that impact financially? Well, your main, like the flag you're seeing there for Switzerland, that tells you that your main Kabbalah can all use those finances. It's going to run off of money, currencies, things that we can see. When you get to the dark side, it runs off of other currencies, which include quantum currencies such as blood, DNA, underground markets, things that they may be selling according to witchcraft paraphernalia. And those markets will be underground. So when you see flags for both symbols displayed, it means that they have open market in those areas for the Knights of Malta, both above ground and below ground.
A lot to unpack there, guys. let's touch base on the Crusades and how that began. And Tony, maybe you want to add a little context to that in regard to the Crusades, because a lot of people heard of the Crusades, but they don't know specifically a lot about what is it? What was it about? What did they do? Maybe touch on that for everybody, please.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of like that's the origin story.
Yeah.
So basically, you've got a pope in 1095, the year 1095, who receives a letter from the East, from a Christian ruler in the East, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire. And he's saying, look, we're under attack from these new Muslim warriors. They were called the Seljuk Turks. And Christians are being killed, churches are being desecrated. You must come and help us. And the Pope makes this speech and says, you know, we have to rise up, and it's a new type of war. You know, the Crusades, nobody had ever seen this kind of, you know, a war in the name of Christ. You know, that seemed so unusual at the time. But people apparently shouted Deus Vult in Latin, you know, God wills it. And it kicked off 200 years of the Crusades. And, you know, as I've said before, the thing about the Crusades was initially a lot of the people who went out to the Middle East to fight for Christ were not the most savory characters. I mean, there were, you know, criminals and people on the run and all sorts. And it soon became obvious that what the Crusades needed was armies of professional soldiers who'd stay there all the time, but also, you know, who would be moral, who would believe in, you know, in fighting for Christ, really believe in it. And so you get the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller, who are part monk, part warrior, who, you know, they observe chastity and poverty and obedience. They live in a very disciplined way. They pray several times a day. But I think as Jessie was touching on there, these were knights also who were out in the East. And it's something that's been written about a lot, is where they influenced by ideas that they came across, you know, in the East. So you had, you know, groups like the Mandeans, who thought that John the Baptist was the Messiah. You had the Yazidis, who still exist today, who shared Christian beliefs, but also thought that there's a peacock angel who rules over the earth with 7 archangels, and that humanity is descended from Adam alone and not Eve. And then you had mystics like the Sufis within Islam. So there are all sorts of ideas that people think may have influenced the Knights Hospitaller, their beliefs, their rituals, and ultimately their symbology as well, because there's a lot of kind of shared symbology. For example, the Druze, another group out there, have symbology very similar to the Freemasons. You know, how does that come about? So a lot of interest in, you know, in what kind of esoteric, and, you know, Jessie mentioned the Kabbalah, you know, what kind of belief systems, and that obviously came from the Jewish faith out there, would have influenced the Hospitallers, you know, and led, as you say, to them having very distinct symbols with signs and codes and so on within them.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to touch, what I can touch on actually is I can go mad on banking if you want.
Let's. Oh, George, you got to unmute.
Oh, right. Well, I tell you, I'd start on banking.
Talk about banking, please. Yeah, let's touch on the banking, because I think everyone's fascinated with this banking thing. So go ahead.
Well, there's a very interesting scandal that arose in the late 1970s, early 1980s.
Now hold on a sec. I got to pause you for a moment. Are you saying a bank and a scandal at the same time? I've never heard of such things in my life. This is a shock to me.
I know.
Banking and scandals.
With Knights of Malta, George.
With the Knights of Malta, a secret society. All right, you've intrigued me. I'm interested. Please.
This involves, get ready for this. This involves the Vatican, the
Wow.
Freemasons, and the Knights of Malta, and ends up with a banker found hanged under Blackfriars, an Italian banker found hanged under Blackfriars Bridge in London. And no way could he have, unless he was a gymnast, have got to the point where he was hanged, you know, blah, blah, blah. But no, basically, there is big financial scandal surrounding the Vatican in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And particularly, there's a bank called the Banco Ambrosiano, which the Vatican basically owns. And it's up to no good, and it's got a lot of dirty dealings. And a lot of the people involved in that bank are Freemasons. including this guy, Roberto Calvi, who's mysteriously found dead under Blackfriars Bridge in London. But this Masonic lodge, which is very involved in this Vatican bank, which is up to all sorts of financial skullduggery, this Masonic lodge, which is called Propaganda 2, P2 for short, in Italy, is led by a man called Liccio Gelli. And Liccio Gelli is a Knight of Malta. So you have a Knight of Malta running a Masonic lodge, which is running a Vatican bank, which is involved in all kinds of, large-scale financial skullduggery, including, by the way, there's an American cardinal who's involved as well, who famously said, "You can't run the church on Hail Marys alone." It was his excuse for get all sorts of bad skullduggery. But and I can add to that, in 1990, Italian television, get ready for another element in this story, Rai Television, which is the state broadcaster in Italy, claimed that the CIA had paid Liccio Gelli to conduct terrorist activity in Italy. So you've got the CIA as well. I mean, obviously the CIA have denied this, but this was a massive scandal, and the Vatican really had to clean up its act afterwards. But a scandal that, involved, as I say, the Knights of Malta, the Freemasons, Italian politicians, and the CIA. So just about everybody sucked into that one. And that's really where an example where, all of this came to the surface, bubbled to the surface, this kind of connection between banking, the Knights of Malta, the church, and so on. So I advise anybody to go and read about it, because you will not believe what you read in that scandal. I've only scratched the surface.
Just to add to that, I find that interesting, the story you just said, because that sounds very familiar to a movie. And there's a movie called The Godfather. They did 1, 2, and part 3. But in part 3, the synopsis to it, without giving too much away, is there was corruption within the church. Money was being skimmed and funneled, and they needed to borrow money. And in order to borrow money, they went to the mafia, the Italian mafia. And there was a scandal because they promised one thing to the mob, and they didn't deliver. And interesting enough, what you said is the high pope or the high banker priest of so forth was hung in the movie from a high point. I don't know if it was a bridge or wherever it was, but what familiarities that Francis Ford Coppola took from real life and implemented into the movie.
Yeah,
it's totally based on the Roberto Calvi scandal, and also another theory that Pope John Paul I, who was a pope elected in 1978, he only lasted 30 days. He was a patriarch of Venice. He was elected pope, and he suddenly died after barely a month as pope. And there was, books written at the time, a lot of speculation at the time, that he'd been killed because he was going to clean up the Vatican, especially this bank. So basically, Coppola based Godfather 3 entirely on the whole Roberto Calvi Knights of Malta. So yes, there is a Knights of Malta link to the Godfather.
There it is. And what you just said about the Pope, he mentions that in the movie as well. There's a good Pope who is going to clean up everything, and they murder him in his sleep.
Yeah. And it's curious because you have, they're going to have the Vatican is considered your Holy See. It's considered the male within the system. You'll have individuals connected like to your Italian mafias, your Russian mafias. They'll connect in the system through the Illuminati, which you get a lot of that Illuminati influence into the Knights in the Italy area. What's curious though is like you'll have some members that they won't claim that they're under the Vatican. And where it really connects back, then they'll say they're under the Queen or the Mother. And rather than necessarily the Queen of England, it connects back to your apostolic Catholic Church that's in Armenia, which is known as the Mother See, which is out of Turkey. So it's interesting as you get into this history, like some of it connects back to things that go to their very founding and some of the groups that they were fighting. And that financially carries over into these two aspects where they're going to draw either from, the Holy See, the Father See, or the Mother See for their financial things.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting. Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
no, I'm just going to say it isn't actually on the Russia thing. Not before I forget, I have a senior moment and forget what's there. Actually, after they lost control of Malta, a lot of them went to Russia, and that's
What?
worth pointing out.
Which is why you get the Russian mafia and Illuminati
Really?
as well. Yeah.
Wow, we're breaking. Now, see, this is why I love this show, because this is stuff I spent 13 years not even interested in. I was more about the supernatural and the occult aspects, not even looking at the Knights of Malta. And here we go. Look at this. Look at the bloodlines and how they escape and go to Russia. Now we have a Russian mafia. I mean, so much from this. I want to share another quick video of a guy that's very well known, one of the first guys to break down certain things in the truth movement. You'll know him. I won't say his name yet. I'll play the video first, get your take on what he has to say, and see if you guys confirm what he has to say, or is he maybe a little bit too much of a conspiracy theorist. I'm going to play right now. So turn up your volumes. Here it is.
CIA, which was called the OSS in the Second World War. CIA originally, the OSS was originally founded by men who were members of an order called the Knights of Malta. It is a Roman secret society of powerful Freemasons who have operated in Europe for many, many hundreds of years. The Knights of Malta, along with the kindred orders like the Knights Templars, who were the international bankers in Switzerland. This is why Switzerland's never in any war, because this is where the Templars call home. This is the international banking. You don't mess with the boss lives. So I think that there's something going on here very big.
Do you have any idea what that is?
Yes, I certainly do. I haven't spent 40 years with this subject not to know.
All right. Who wants to touch on that first? Jesse, I'll let you go first. What do you think on what he had to say?
Yeah, that's again, I'm going to get into the symbology of it.
Yeah.
I fully believe that there's a connection with the CIA, with the Knights of Malta, and the secret societies. But what's more intriguing, and I've brought out in past shows, like the symbolism of the 8-pointed, the nautical star, how that at one layer connects to their rituals, and which time and seasons those rituals fall into based on the points on that nautical star. But what I've never brought out publicly before is that this also gets to your CIA vaults. So it tells you also the times and the seasons of when you can get access to secret materials, like their underground libraries, their secret information, but it also goes with their money system. And so that gets very intriguing when you think about it, that they've split everything among the quadrants into access for their Knights Templars. And, if they have the base cross as their symbol, that means that the main 4 times of the year they get to access certain things. And if their main symbol is an X, that means that in those off seasons, that's when those Knights groups get to access other vaults. So they'll have them only open at certain times. So it gets even more intriguing. And I'm curious to see what Tony has to say about how all that interconnects with the CIA and the Knights of Malta.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm trying to think what to say first, though, because there's so much to say. But I'll see if I can cram it all in. But I mean, the idea of a link between the CIA and the Knights of Malta has been very persistent. I'm not necessarily endorsing it, but it's a curious thing because as you say, their loyalty is supposed to be to the Vatican, as it was with the Knights Templar. Actually, the Knights Hospital have had quite a difficult relationship with the Vatican. They got slapped down actually by the last Pope, Pope Francis. In fact, I think he sacked the entire governing council at one point because do you want to know why? It's quite bizarre. One of the Knights of Malta had been distributing condoms in Myanmar as part of a kind of birth control program, and then the Knights of Malta sacked their own guy. Pope Francis then intervened and said, no, reinstate him. He was doing good. It's just, you may not agree with it. I'm not going to make a fuss about it, so you shouldn't make a fuss about it. Reinstate him. And the Knights of Malta said, no, we're loyal to you, but we are also, as the Knights of Malta, our own sovereign state. They still regard themselves as a sovereign country. So they basically said to Pope Francis, get out of our affairs. And he retaliated then by sacking the entire Sovereign Council and summoning a lot of the Knights of Malta to Rome for a dressing down. So there is a difficult relationship with the Vatican, interestingly. But then coming back to the CIA link, there has been this idea of a link between the CIA and the Knights of Malta. And there's a veteran journalist, he's still alive at the time of recording, I think he's about 90 odd, Seymour Hersh. Now, he claimed back in 2011 that the US military's Joint Special Operations Command, get this right, had been infiltrated, he said, by Christian fanatics who see themselves as modern day crusaders. And he named people, I won't name them now because I don't want to open you to any legals, but he named certain people as being specifically linked to the Knights of Malta. So basically, there's this recurring theory that the upper echelons of the CIA are members of the, to give it its full name, the Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Rhodes, and Malta. And they are a secret, ultra-secret Roman Catholic cabal at the top of the CIA. And some people say, even though JFK was a Catholic president, they were involved in assassinating him. This cabal within the CIA, that's another theory out there. Of course, everybody denies this. CIA just say it's ridiculous and so on. And Knights of Malta certainly deny it. But that's basically, in a nutshell, the theory. And if you look up Seymour Hersh, 2011 CIA Knights of Malta, you'll get his whole. He wrote a very detailed article at the time, which was massively attacked at the time as well, I should say.
Oh, George, you got to unmute.
Thank you. It continues with a lot of rumors in social media. Again, this is how the topic came up, because people are so interested and fascinated with other groups. They would never think that the Knights of Malta are anything special. They have extreme amounts of power. And I was shocked with them, because in certain locations, you'll see their logo at a certain hall or banquets facility. And I believe they recruit on a smaller level if you're Catholic. If that's correct, please confirm if I'm wrong, but I believe they are recruiting.
I should say, so there is a kind of version of the Knights of St. John in Britain that is Protestant, and it's quite separate. It's just something that was set up in the 19th century, because obviously Britain's not a Catholic country anymore, and they just run an ambulance service and the St. John's ambulance and so on. So they're kind of distinct. I mean, the people we're really talking about here are the Knights of Malta, who are based in Rome. And actually their headquarters is a very interesting headquarters. I was there last year. It's based in the Roman Forum, the ancient Roman Forum. The medieval building, but it's built into what was the temple to the god of war, the god Mars, the temple of Mars Ultor, built 2,500 years or 2,000 years ago. So it's a curious place to have your
in Rome.
In Rome, yeah, it's built. It's literally in the Roman Forum, in the Temple to War. I mean, how interesting is that?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's and interestingly, I met a group in Rome last year who claimed to be modern day Templars. Basically, they claimed they're Roman Catholic Templars, not Freemason Templars, and they hate the Knights of Malta. They hate
Really,
because they say those buildings should be ours. Those are Templar buildings that you've stolen, and we want them back. And that's what they told me over dinner. So there's no love lost there.
So there is a somewhat love-hate or more hate-hate relationship between the Templars and the Knights of Malta.
Yeah. Well, that with the Catholic Templars, who are called Templari Oggi, they have chapters in the United States and in Europe. And as I say, they are distinct from Masonic Templars. They hate the Freemasons as well, of course, because Freemasons aren't Catholics, and the church has actually condemned the Freemasons. You can't be a Catholic and a Freemason, so they're definitely out. But they also condemn the Knights of Malta, who they kind of seem to view as kind of equally awful, basically.
There is another video that I saw, and I thought, this is interesting. Let me share this video with the guys and the girls and the crew and get their take on it, because I love scrolling social media and seeing what's going on, because there's a whole new generation who's fascinated with this stuff. And I spend so many hours going through it to see what's a good topic, what's not, what's this information, and having, certain people such as yourself, very well read and knowledgeable, and communicating with certain people that may be possibly part of these groups. I know you, Tony, have spoken to individuals that are part of these groups. So that brings a whole new light, shines a light on the topic. So let me play this quick clip and then get your take on it. Here it is.
Do you think that the Vatican and that specifically maybe the Knights of Malta had anything to do with the UFO kind of reverse engineering or transport or oversight?
I think that an element of the Knights of Malta have something to do with everything.
And why do you think that?
Because of the people that there were in this Monte Carlo group. There's a thing called the Monte Carlo group that is at the top of the entire Knights of Malta structure. And I discovered that there were non-Catholics in it, which didn't make any sense to me at all. Because
Like
the Knights of Malta is a Catholic men's club like thing. Yeah, but there's this high executive council that turned out that Henry Kissinger was on it, and George Bush Sr. was on, who's Episcopal.
That's amazing.
The Monte Carlo group had these individuals. They were part of it. Apparently, they're just above the Knights of Malta. He said he was shocked because you had to be Catholic to be a part of them. They weren't. What are your thoughts? We'll begin with you, Tony.
I mean, I think it plays to what Seymour Hersh was saying, that this idea that the Knights of Malta have actually actively infiltrated the CIA, the U.S. military, and so on. So that's very much his theory. I'm not familiar with the Monte Carlo group. They're clearly not the professed who are the top layer, because they're clearly not celibate and ultra Catholic. He's saying that this group are actually multi-denominational, nevertheless kind of hovering above the Knights Hospitallers. So I think that's kind of chimes with what Seymour Hersh is saying.
Yeah. Jess, let's get your take, and what do you think on that video and so forth?
I think, we're going to see among these secret societies that there's a larger umbrella, that umbrella being the sovereign military order, the brotherhood system. Within those systems, they can sit in as many circle groups as they want to sit in. So they're going to define each of those things, the Catholic, the Kabbalah, whatever groups they're sitting in, even getting into their Judaism, or you're going to have some of those groups that will be more than just a Knights Templar. They might be a Knight of the Royal Ark degree also, or other degrees that they're going to throw in there. And it's all based on their studies. What's their focus? What is their specialty that they want to get into? How are they going to define themselves and their beliefs? And how will that impact their degrees of illumination, both on the brotherhood side and the sovereign military side? So to me, it would make sense that, you're going to have what seems like a mixing, not everything being Catholic, not everything, being based on their typical beliefs for just that one circle group.
I mean, I could throw in kind of something just to kind of, because the thing about these organizations, remember, they've got a very, America's celebrating 250 years. That's nothing to the Hospitallers. They've been around since, the 11th century, and they've got a very long timeline in their heads. And to come back to some of the stuff that Jessie's been saying, that, the Hospitallers were often suspected of being heretics, basically. And I'm talking about by the church. So think about this. They were ruling Malta. Malta is, Italy's like that boot, isn't it? And Malta is like a little football at the end, of the boot. So it's not far from Italy, but you had the popes, 400 or 500 years ago, looking at the Hospitallers, and they said, well, we better investigate these guys because we're not completely convinced that there aren't some heretics amongst them, some people with wrong beliefs. And they sent the Inquisition Now, this actually happened. They sent the Inquisition down to Malta, and the Knights of Malta basically said to the Pope, we're not going to cooperate with the Inquisition. And remember, the Inquisition are the people who arrest you, torture you, interrogate you, and if they think you're a heretic, they burn you to death, in the public square. Well, the Knights of Malta actually started arresting them when they turned up in Malta, and they started arresting anybody who informed to them as well. So they went for a kind of policy of non-cooperation with the Inquisition. And remember, the Inquisition, in Southern Europe, continued all the way to the early 19th century, all the way through, to the end of the Hospitallers running Malta. And the Hospitallers just didn't cooperate with the Inquisition. Now, you've got to ask yourself, what have they got to hide? I mean, if they were good Catholics, why were they not cooperating with the Inquisition? Why were they defying the Pope? And we do know, and I've written about this in my book on Freemasonry, which is coming out later this year. There we are, shameless book plug. But I have written about this guy I'm checking it here. This guy was the 68th Grand Master of the Knights Hospitaller. He was a Portuguese guy called Manuel Pinto de Fonseca, and he was the head of the Knights Hospitaller and the ruler of Malta, and he was a Freemason at the same time that he was running the Knights of Malta, and he was, by the way, a 33rd degree Freemason right at the top, and he was also into alchemy. He was looking for the Philosopher's Stone, and we know for a fact that he hung out with one of the leading Freemasons at the time who lived with him in his palace for a while, a guy called Count Cagliostro. I don't know if you've ever come across him. Very interesting, who was the head of something called Ancient Egyptian Freemasonry at the time. And he was actually a fake count. He called himself a count, but he wasn't. But he lived with the Grand Master in Malta, and they were both there conducting occult experiments. They were both Freemasons until they fell out for personal reasons. So we do know that the Knights Hospitaller were involved in, things that were not Catholic. I mean, because the Freemasons are condemned by the church. So here we have a head of the Knights of Malta who is a Freemason. And as I've already mentioned, that Freemason link has continued all the way into the 20th century. So at least possibly into the 21st as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Jess, please touch on that.
I was just going to ask if you can get into, we know within the Catholic connection that they're going to have certain altars that they service, that's going to get into, what they're going to call the Eucharist, the holy tables, all of those things where they'll have, the scripture and other things on there. They may have other idols that they're going to put on there, which may connect to saints or to their worship of Mary. But can you get into what are some of the altars that are going to connect to this, behind the scenes worship that your Knights of Malta were servicing?
Well, both mainly the Templars, of course, were accused of putting, devils on their altars. I mean, a cat sometimes on the altar, or an image of Baphomet. I don't know. I can't sort of comment on the Hospitallers putting heretical objects or what those objects might be. But what I can tell you, and I'm going to be very naughty now and tell you something that was told to me over dinner by these Templars in Rome. So I'm being very naughty and telling you a big secret now. These Catholic Templars that I met in Rome, they are very concerned about, there's a lot of ancient abandoned churches now in Europe that are being taken over by Satanists. It's a big problem in England as well. People conducting rituals because the church just doesn't have the personnel to keep tabs on all their churches. So one of the things that these modern day Templars do is they go to church. This is what he told me. They go to churches, they stand in military formation, and they have these kind of psychic prayer battles, is how he described it, with both the Satanists and the Freemasons and the Knights of Malta, to expel them all from these churches and to reclaim them for what they see as the true Catholic Church. And they claim that they've been threatened. They claim their cars have been vandalized. I have to take their word for that, obviously. But yeah, so that's that's
It almost
that's
sounds like
exciting
the
thing, I know.
group is that connected to Fatima as well? Because
In
you've
what
got
way?
some groups of Fatima that do that same thing where they go in, they're going to do prayer in certain territories or areas.
Or having kind of like prayer battles against.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Fatima. I was there a few years ago, but it is an incredible place, and there's things that go on at Fatima. I don't know if you've ever seen the thing where they throw candles into these flames. It's the most bizarre kind of rituals that happen at Fatima. But yes, I mean, there's I mean, the kind of Marian cult at Fatima is quite unique, and as you know, John Paul II was massively. He was so much into it that he sent the bullet, that the assassin's bullet that went into his abdomen. He actually sent the bullet to Fatima, and it's in the crown of Mary now in Fatima.
Wow.
That's probably for another podcast, but
That's another podcast. Okay,
we've lost your audio there.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Again, interesting stuff. I want to touch on one particular thing, and you don't have to say anything if you don't want to, or if you don't know anything, that's fine. But if there's one thing you could add, one little thing, you said that there was experimental occult rituals. They were doing experimental occult rituals. Can you touch on that, or give us just a little tidbit more on what you meant by that?
Well, we know for a fact, and it's well documented. It's this particular Grand Master, the Portuguese Grand Master in the 18th century, who basically he was quite open about the fact that he was into the occult. He was conducting these alchemical experiments basically to find the Philosopher's Stone, and on top of that, he was quite open about being a Freemason. I mean, all of this was horrifying to the church in Rome and very alienating for them. It's interesting that he was Portuguese, of course, because it's in Portugal where the Knights Templar continued by rebranding themselves as the Order of Christ. And coming back to Jessie's point about symbols, the Order of Christ's cross is kind of closer to the Hospitaller cross with its various angles. It's not the same as the Templar cross, and it's also a cross within a cross, actually Portugal has got a long history of kind of this syncretic, this mixing of Freemasonry, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, and Templarism, and so
on. Very interesting stuff there. All right, we appreciate you. You gave a little bit of context to it. And again, the book that a lot of people are talking about when it comes to that particular subject is this one right here, The Knights of Malta, A Modern Resurrection. And that's by H.J.A. Shore or something. But this guy here, this is the reporter, Hirsch, who's a unbelievable. Just while you guys were talking, I was doing some research on him. This guy's extremely intelligent, very smart, did a lot of stories. I mean, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner, journalist.
Oh, this Seymour Hersh isn't like any old journalist. When he said these things in 2011, that when he was saying that, the Knights of Malta had infiltrated the U.S. military's Joint Special Operations Command. I remember this is in just after the Iraq War and so on. I mean, people were not just shocked; a lot of people were angry. There was a lot of attacks on him, and people said, he's senile, he's old, he's lost his way, blah blah blah. But if you go back and read the article, it's interesting stuff, and I think it's kind of central to some of the videos that you've been showing today.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And as you say, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist.
As you guys kept talking and bringing him up in his book, and a lot of people got a lot of research from him because he spent a lot of time doing this. I'm sure when you're someone that high up as a journalist, and he's from the old school where he keeps his sources close to his heart. He has a different type of technique and training. When you bring that up, this guy had insiders, 100%. Some of the information he published did not come from the Google, because we didn't have the internet as good as it was today as it is then. We didn't have Reddit, or we didn't have the dark web so much as powerful as it was back then when he wrote this. So he 100% had people part of the Knights of Malta and these other groups feeding him information for this report. Would you agree or disagree with that, Tony?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, he is a journalist in the tradition of, all the president's men, exposing Watergate, all that kind of thing. That's the kind of, I think he's born in 1937, 38. So, he's already in his mid-30s by the time Watergate hit. So he's come up through the whole. I mean, I started in print journalism, in pre-digital print journalism, when you had to, take people out for long lunches, ply them with wine, and get them to talk. So that's the kind of world that he came out of. So. That's what really surprised people when he wrote this article. People thought, well, what happened to Seymour Hersh? But he was very, very dogged, very convinced that this was actually happening. But nobody has taken up the baton really since. I mean, except for some of the authors that you're talking about. But in terms of mainstream media, that is a story that's definitely been dropped.
Yeah. Incredible information. Guys, thank you. What an episode. Hopefully that gave a little bit of light shined upon the Knights Templar in its connection to the Knights of Malta and its other insider groups, what they've done, what they're about, a whole lot of things. We've given you a lot of information. You can go out there and do your own homework. Go out there. It's an interesting group. Are they still in power? I mean, we don't know for sure. This is all speculation, of course, but makes you want to wonder and makes you think. Jessie, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think this has been a dynamic conversation, and I think we should do a part 2 and do a deeper dive.
Love it. We'll have to get into the more occultic, esoteric aspects of it. Let's dive deep into that stuff and the rituals and what they did, and more into that particular gentleman. What was his name once again? That Portuguese, half Knights Templar, half Knights of Malta guy.
Yeah, his name was, I'm going to check his name here. It was Manuel, like Manuel, Pinto, which is Pinto, Da, and then Fonseca, Fonsecca. And I write about him in my, it's not out yet, so you can't buy it. It's called The Knights Templar and Freemasonry. It's out later this year. But I discovered him while I was writing about this fake Count Cagliostro, who's another astonishing. A lot of these Freemasons, by the way, are astonishing characters, but so are these Knights of Malta. Are quite something.
Excellent. All right, Tony, as we throw it to you, let everyone know how they can support, follow you, and buy your books.
I'm a humble author who has written 2 books on the Knights Templar, and I insist you all go and buy them. Now, one is called The Knights Templar History and Mystery. That's if you want to know the history of the Templars in the Crusades. But then if you want all the stuff about the trials of the Templars and how they were destroyed, then the book is called Downfall of the Templars, Guilty of Diabolic Magic. And both published by Pen and Sword, available on Amazon. And please help a struggling author to pay for his summer holidays.
Yeah, I love it. Jessie, how can people support your ministry and what you're doing?
You can find me and support me on patreon.com/Jessie Czebotar, as well as my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. And on there, you'll find my courses, my books, my workshops, and a lot of other good stuff.
Guys, for me, again, supporting me on Patreon is incredible. It means a lot. Follow the link in the description below to find out more about Tony, as well as being part of the after show. Coming up next, right now, we're going to Patreon. It's going to be me and Jessie. We're going to do a Q&A. Be a part of it, join, or all those that have been helping, Lisa D and a few others. It means a lot. On Venmo. Now on Venmo, no more Patreon. No more PayPal. They're not helping. They blocked my account. When you're too close to the truth, something happens. So Venmo, where it looks like they've been okay with me thus far. So anything you send goes a long way. Support me on Venmo. It means a lot. Guys, on behalf of Jessie, Mr. Tony McMahon, and myself, I thank you all for watching. I hope you have a blessed week, and we'll see you on Monday. Good night, and God bless everyone.